Welcome to our channel. In today's video we are going to learn about 197 countries and their flag, capitals and currencies. Let's check it out. Afghanistan. Capital, Kabul. Currency, Afghan Afghani AFN. Albania. Capital, Tirana. Currency, Albanian Lekal. Algeria. Capital, Algiers. Currency, Algerian Dinar Dizidi. Andorra. Capital, Andorra la Vella. Currency, Euro EUR. Angola. Capital, Luanda. Currency, Angolan Kwanza AOA. Antigua and Barbuda. Capital, St. John's. Currency, East Caribbean Dollar XCD. Argentina. Capital, Buenos Aires. Currency, Argentine Peso Ars. Armenia. Capital, Yerevan. Currency, Armenian Dirham AMD. Australia. Capital, Canberra. Currency, Australian Dollar Odd. Austria. Capital, Vienna. Currency, Euro EUR. Azerbaijan. Capital, Baku. Currency, Azerbaijani Manat AZN. Bahamas. Capital, Nassau. Currency, Bahamian Dollar BSD. Bahrain. Capital, Manama. Currency, Bahraini Dinar BHD. Bangladesh. Capital, Dhaka. Currency, Bangladeshi Taka BDT. Barbados. Capital, Bridgetown. Currency, Barbadian Dollar BBD. Belarus. Capital, Minsk. Currency, Belarusian Ruble BYN. Belgium. Capital, Brussels. Currency, Euro EUR. Belize. Capital, Belmopan. Currency, Belize Dollar BZD. Benin. Capital, Porto Novo. Currency, West African CFA franc XOF. Bhutan. Capital, Thimphu. Currency, Bhutanese Ngultram BTN. Bolivia. Capital, Sucre Constitutional. La Paz Administrative. Currency, Bolivian Boliviano. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Capital, Sarajevo. Currency, Bosnia and Herzegovina Convertible Mark BAM. Botswana. Capital, Gaborone. Currency, Botswana Pula BWP. Brazil. Capital, Brasilia. Currency, Brazilian Real BRL. Brunei. Capital, Bandar Seri Begawan. Currency, Brunei Dollar BND. Bulgaria. Capital, Sofia. Currency, Bulgarian Lef BGN. Burkina Faso. Capital, Ouagadougou. Currency, West African CFA franc XOF. Burundi. Capital, Gitega Political. Bujumbura Economic. Currency, Burundian franc BIF. Cabo Verde. Capital, Praia. Currency, Cape Verdean Escudo CVE. Cambodia. Capital, Phnom Penh. Currency, Cambodian Real KHR. Cameroon. Capital, Yaoundé. Currency, Central African CFA franc XAF. Canada. Capital, Ottawa. Currency, Canadian Dollar CAD. Central African Republic. Capital, Bangui. Currency, Central African CFA franc XAF. Chad. Capital, N'Djamena. Currency, Central African CFA franc. Chile. Capital, Santiago. Currency, Chilean peso. China. Capital, Beijing. Currency, Chinese yuan renminbi. Colombia. Capital, Bogota. Currency, Colombian peso. Comoros. Capital, Moroni. Currency, Comorian franc. Congo. Republic of the. Capital, Brazzaville. Currency, Congolese franc. Costa Rica. Capital, San Jose. Currency, Costa Rican colon. Croatia. Capital, Zagreb. Currency, Croatian kuna. Cuba. Capital, Havana. Currency, Cuban peso. Cuban convertible peso. Cyprus, capital, Nicosia. Currency, Euro. Cyprus pound was previously used. Czech Republic, capital, Prague. Currency, Czech koruna. Denmark, capital, Copenhagen. Currency, Danish krona. Djibouti, capital, Djibouti. Currency, Djiboutian franc. Dominica, capital, Roseau. Currency, East Caribbean dollar. Dominican Republic, capital, Santo Domingo. Currency, Dominican peso. East Timor, Timor-Leste. Capital, Dili. Currency, United States dollar. Official, Timor y centavo coins. Unofficial. Ecuador, capital, Quito. Currency, United States dollar. Egypt, capital, Cairo. Currency, Egyptian pound. EGP. El Salvador, capital, San Salvador. Currency, United States dollar. Equatorial Guinea, capital, Malabo. Currency, Central African CFA franc. Eritrea, capital, Asmara. Currency, Eritrean Negfa. Estonia, capital, Tallinn. Currency, Euro. Eswatini, Swaziland, capital, Mbabane and Lobamba. Currency, Swazili-Longeni, South African rand. Ethiopia, capital, Addis Ababa. Currency, Ethiopian birr. Fiji, capital, Suva. Currency, Fijian dollar. Finland, capital, Helsinki. Currency, Euro. France, capital, Paris. Currency, Euro. Gabon, capital, Libreville. Currency, Central African CFA franc. Gambia, capital, Banjul. Currency, Gambian dalasi. Georgia, capital, Tbilisi. Currency, Georgian lari. Germany, capital, Berlin. Ghana, capital, Accra. Currency, Ghanaian cedi. Greece, capital, Athens. Currency, Euro. Grenada, capital, St. George's. Currency, East Caribbean dollar. Guatemala, capital, Guatemala City. Currency, Guatemalan quetzal. Guinea, capital, Conakry. Currency, Guinean franc. Guinea-Bissau, capital, Bissau. Currency, West African franc. Guyana, capital, Georgetown. Currency, Guyanese dollar. Haiti, capital, Port-au-Prince. Currency, Haitian gourd. Honduras, capital, Tegucigalpa. Currency, Honduran lempira. Hungary, capital, Budapest. Currency, Hungarian forint. Iceland, capital, Reykjavik. Currency, Icelandic krona. India, capital, New Delhi. Currency, Indian rupee. Indonesia, capital, Jakarta. Currency, Indonesian rupiah. Iran, capital, Tehran. Currency, Iranian rial. Iraq, capital, Baghdad. Currency, Iraqi dinar. Ireland, capital, Dublin. Currency, euro. Israel, capital, Jerusalem. Currency, Israeli new shekel. Italy, capital, Rome. Currency, euro. Ivory Coast, capital, Yamoussoukro. Currency, West African CFA franc. Jamaica, capital, Kingston. Currency, Jamaican dollar. Japan, capital, Tokyo. Currency, Japanese yen. Jordan, capital, Amman. Currency, Jordanian dinar. Kazakhstan, capital, Nur Sultan. Currency, Kazakhstani tenge. Kenya. Capital, Nairobi. Currency, Kenyan shilling. Kiribati. Capital, South Tarawa. Currency, Australian dollar. Kosovo. Capital, Pristina. Currency, euro. Kuwait. Capital, Kuwait City. Currency, Kuwaiti dinar. Kyrgyzstan. Capital, Bishk. Currency, Kyrgyzstani som. Laos. Capital, Vientiane. Currency, Lao Kip. Latvia. Capital, Riga. Currency, euro. Lebanon. Capital, Beirut. Currency, Lebanese pound. Lesotho. Capital, Maseru. Currency, Lesotho Lodi, South African rand. Liberia. Capital, Monrovia. Currency, Liberian dollar. Libya. Capital, Tripoli. Currency, Libyan dinar. Liechtenstein. Capital, Vaduz. Currency, Swiss franc. Lithuania. Capital, Vilnius. Currency, euro. Luxembourg. Capital, Luxembourg City. Currency, euro. Madagascar. Capital, Antananarivo. Currency, Malagasy Ariary. Malawi. Capital, Lilongwe. Currency, Malawian kwacha. Malaysia. Capital, Kuala Lumpur. Currency, Malaysian ringgit. Maldives. Capital, Male. Currency, Maldivian rupiah. Mali. Capital, Bamako. Currency, West African CFA franc. Malta. Capital, Valletta. Currency, euro. Marshall Islands. Capital, Majuro. Currency, United States dollar. Mauritania. Capital, Nouakchott. Currency, Mauritanian Alguia. Mauritius. Capital, Port Louis. Currency, Mauritian rupee. Mexico. Capital, Mexico City. Currency, Mexican peso. Micronesia. Capital, Palikir. Currency, United States dollar. Moldova. Capital, Chisinau. Currency, Moldovan lez. Monaco. Capital, Monaco. Currency, euro. Mongolia. Capital, Ulaanbaatar. Currency, Mongolian tugrek. Montenegro. Capital, Podgorica. Currency, euro. Morocco. Capital, Rabat. Currency, Moroccan dirham. Mozambique. Capital, Maputo. Currency, Mozambican medical. Myanmar Burma. Capital, Naypyidaw. Currency, Burmese kyat. Namibia. Capital, Windhoek. Currency, Namibian dollar, Namibian rand. Nauru. Capital, Yaren de facto. Currency, Australian dollar. Nepal. Capital, Kathmandu. Currency, Nepalese rupee. Netherlands. Capital, Amsterdam. Official, The Hague seat of government. Currency, euro. New Zealand. Capital, Wellington. Currency, New Zealand dollar. Nicaragua. Capital, Managua. Currency, Nicaraguan Cordoba. Niger. Capital, Niamey. Currency, West African CFA franc. Nigeria. Capital, Abuja. Currency, Nigerian naira. North Korea. Capital, Pyongyang. Currency, North Korean won. North Macedonia, formerly Macedonia. Capital, Skopje. Currency, Macedonian dinar. Norway. Capital, Oslo. Currency, Norwegian krona. Oman. Capital, Muscat. Currency, Omani rial. Pakistan. Capital, Islamabad. Currency, Pakistani rupee. Palau, capital, Angurulmud. Currency, United States dollar. Palestine, capital, Ramallah. Administrative, East Jerusalem claimed. Currency, Israeli new shekel, Jordanian dinar, Egyptian pound. Panama, capital, Panama City. Currency, Panamanian balboa, United States dollar. Papua New Guinea, capital, Port Moresby. Currency, Papua New Guinean Kina. Paraguay, capital, Asuncion. Currency, Paraguayan Guarani. Peru, capital, Lima. Currency, Peruvian sol. Philippines, capital, Manila. Currency, Philippine peso. Poland, capital, Warsaw. Currency, Polish zloty. Portugal, capital, Lisbon. Currency, euro. Qatar, capital, Doha. Currency, Qatari riyal. Romania, capital, Bucharest. Currency, Romanian legs. Russia, capital, Moscow. Currency, Russian ruble. Rwanda, capital, Kigali. Currency, Rwandan franc. St. Kitts and Nevis, capital, Basseterre. Currency, East Caribbean dollar. St. Lucia, capital, Castries. Currency, East Caribbean dollar. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, capital, Kingstown. Currency, East Caribbean dollar. Samoa, capital, Apia. Currency, Samoan tala. San Marino, capital, San Marino. Currency, euro. Sao Tome and Principe, capital, Sao Tome. Currency, Sao Tomean dobra. Saudi Arabia, capital, Riyadh. Currency, Saudi riyal. Senegal, capital, Dakar. Currency, West African CFA franc. Serbia, capital, Belgrade. Currency, Serbian dinar. Seychelles, capital, Victoria. Currency, Seychellois rupee. Sierra Leone, capital, Freetown. Currency, Sierra Leonean Leone. Singapore, capital, Singapore. Currency, Singapore dollar. Slovakia, capital, Bratislava. Currency, euro. Slovenia, capital, Ljubljana. Currency, euro. Solomon Islands, capital, Honiara. Currency, Solomon Islands dollar. Somalia, capital, Mogadishu. Currency, Somali shilling. South Africa, capital, Pretoria administrative. Cape Town legislative. Bloemfontein judicial. Currency, South African rand. South Sudan, capital, Juba. Currency, South Sudanese pound. Spain, capital, Madrid. Currency, euro. Sri Lanka, capital, Colombo commercial. Sri Jayawardenera Kot administrative. Currency, Sri Lankan rupee. Sudan, capital, Khartoum. Currency, Sudanese pound. Suriname, capital, Paramaribo. Currency, Surinamese dollar. Sweden, capital, Stockholm. Currency, Swedish krona. Switzerland, capital, Bern. Currency, Swiss franc. Syria, capital, Damascus. Currency, Syrian pound. Tajikistan, capital, Dushanbe. Currency, Tajikistani somoni. Tanzania, capital, Dodoma legislative. Dar es Salaam administrative. Currency, Tanzanian shilling. Thailand. Capital, Bangkok. Currency, Thai baht. Togo. Capital, Lome. Currency, West African CFA franc. Tonga. Capital, Nuku'alofa. Currency, Tongan Ponga. Trinidad and Tobago. Capital, Port of Spain. Currency, Trinidad and Tobago dollar. Tunisia. Capital, Tunis. Currency, Tunisian dinar. Turkey. Capital, Ankara. Currency, Turkish lira. Turkmenistan. Capital, Ashgabat. Currency, Turkmenistan manat. Tuvalu. Capital, Funafuti. Currency, Australian dollar. Uganda. Capital, Kampala. Currency, Ugandan shilling. Ukraine. Capital, Kiev. Currency, Ukrainian hryvnia. United Arab Emirates UAE. Capital, Abu Dhabi. Currency, UAE dirham. United Kingdom UK. Capital, London. Currency, pound sterling. United States of America USA. Capital, Washington DC. Currency, United States dollar. Uruguay. Capital, Montevideo. Currency, Uruguayan peso. Uzbekistan. Capital, Tashkent. Currency, Uzbekistani so'em. Vanuatu. Capital, Port Vila. Currency, Vanuatu vachu. Vatican City Holy See. Capital, Vatican City. Currency, Euro. Venezuela. Capital, Caracas. Currency, Venezuelan Bolivar. Vietnam. Capital, Hanoi. Currency, Vietnamese dong. Yemen. Capital, Sana'a. Currency, Yemeni rial. Zambia. Capital, Lusaka. Currency, Zambian kwacha. Zimbabwe. Capital, Harare. Currency, Zimbabwean dollar. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.